Hello watch aficionados, hope you're all really well. Just going to test to make sure that it is recording. Yes, it's recording. I'm a bit blind today. I wanted to get out another video. So I did a video a few days ago and it felt quite good. It felt liberating to get a good old video out. It's been some time and I didn't want to do another update video or anything like that. I thought I'd do something on a certain topic. I think most of my videos have been about the psychology of, you know, buying, flipping, different models, what's going on in the market. But I wanted to sort of take a deeper dive today into Rolex as a brand. Maybe touch on luxury watches, maybe first luxury watch. You know, what was the theory behind it? What was the hypothesis for many people who go out and buy their first luxury watch? So I did a bit of YouTube binging the other day, and I watched some videos here and there, and I thought, you know, where else can I take this kind of micro channel of mine? What can I do to get people chatting, get people thinking? And I did one of my famous notes for me to sort of focus on, and I thought, what if I go today into looking at why wear a Rolex? You could say why wear a luxury watch, but why wear a Rolex? Why do people go for Rolex? You know, the name, the brand, the heritage, the years behind it, the famous branding, James Bonds of the world, most famous people wearing it, etc. But what does it mean to have a Rolex sub or a GMT? What's going on with regards to that? Well, I think why wear a Rolex for, let's just say, any average Joe? Are they a watch collector? Are they not a watch collector? Do they want status? Do they want it to be recognized? Do they want the people in their lives around them to start looking at them differently? You know, do the people around you reflect back the way you think? So you get a new watch, you start wearing it to the office, you start wearing it on a daily basis, out bars, going out with your friends. Unless you say to one of your mates, you know, I've bought a Rolex, you know, this is the top business, this is the nuts. Who's really going to pick up on it? I found that I've rarely ever been complimented on a Rolex of mine by anyone other than people who have a Rolex or have had one or are looking to buy one, because they've started to do the research and they start to learn about the references, the models, etc., etc. To sort of share a little bit about me, you know, if you're going to buy a Rolex Submariner, Sea Dweller, dive watch, the number one reason you're not going to buy it is, or the number one reason you're definitely not going to buy it, is because you're a diver. You're definitely not a diver. So all of us have this dream of maybe being a diver. You know, going 10 foot underwater in a local swimming pool is about as diverish as we get. But we do like to know that this watch can go down and look at, I don't know, submarines or whatever. Looking at things at the bottom of the sea within a certain sort of depth range anyway. Another reason that most of us definitely will not have a Rolex, let's say a GMT, is because most of us are not pilots. We don't fly planes. A few of us might have manned a drone that we've bought off Amazon, but there is no real reason to have a pilot's GMT watch other than it's pretty cool. I mean, if you travel a lot, yeah, makes sense, but you're definitely not a pilot. You definitely don't need it that much. Saying that, I really myself want a GMT. But again, why a Rolex? Because they've got super cool subcategories within their range. So I'm definitely not having one because I'm a diver. I'm definitely having one because I'm a pilot. I travel. The next thing, the status. What sort of status do you want? You've got the buyers who want loud status. You want ones that want quiet status. I myself, I like quiet status. Saying status, I'm not looking for status. I like the watch for myself. But I like the right people to maybe notice the watch. Other watch aficionados, other people who are into watches. who notices a Rolex? I've worked across many different offices in the world, from when I was a young buck to now a more senior professional in my career. At the start, everyone was probably talking about Breitlings when we were younger, and obviously as you trend towards going higher up the career ladder, you will start to work in offices where people are rocking Panerais, people are rocking Rolexes, people have higher end Amigas, and it's just a line graph effect. You will start working with people who are more successful. They've been in the industry longer. They've reached better milestones. They might have had fantastic bonuses here and there, and people will choose to celebrate those bonuses in several ways. I was once in a lecture of some sort, and they said that many years ago, men used to, when they used to get a bonus, a commission, or something large, something celebratory at work, they would go out and buy a car. In those days, probably the 60s, where you can just buy a car with a certain amount of commission. But nowadays, people choose to sort of keep it, store it, put it into a house, into a property, which is still a valid investment, but it's not an immediate kind of celebration. It's a longer term one. So when people now have, extra disposable income, shall we say, they will choose to buy maybe a watch or upgrade their car, or install a conservatory in a house. It depends how you're thinking. It's whether you want it for the family or for yourself. I think most of us watch people. We're hardly buying these watches for the family. We'll sell it to the family as, listen, this is for the family. Like I'm wearing this for the family. We're all going to be sorted in 15 years because of this watch. We'll sell it maybe to our wives like that. Some people will say that. But that's a kind of another reason why people might buy Rolexes. They're a fantastic watch, and I think I touched on it in my last video. A few times I've been out in public, and I have seen people wearing Rolexes and stickers, and that really grips me. It's it's not frustrating. It's just funny. It's like, dude, if you're gonna do that, just stay in your living room. Honestly, there are some people out there who will flat out refuse to swim in their Rolexes, even though they're definitely real. They're scared of, maybe, I don't know, damaging something. Who the hell knows? They might swim past a crab with a claw, might just claw that 904L steel. I don't know. Interesting reference. I was talking to someone the other day, and he said that the reason he chooses ceramic over pre-ceramic is because he couldn't deal with the cost of damaging a pre-ceramic if something happened to the bezel. I said, well, bezels are pretty cheap. I mean, if you're going to replace a bezel on a pre-ceramic, it's not going to cost you that much. And then, yeah, but it's a service bezel, and then the drop of the value. And it's like, so many people are so paranoid about the value now. I just think that if you're going to do that, buy it, don't wear it. Just don't do this half-assed measure of wearing it, but with the intent to sell it on, because you're not really owning it. Someone told me a funny thing the other day. They said it's like being with a beautiful woman, stunning, the figure you want, and not sleeping with her because you want to keep her tight for the next man. I just thought that was hilarious, and it's so true. It's like having a car and not putting high mileage in it because you want to get a good resale on it for the next guy who buys it from you. I think there has to be a balance in respect to that, but I don't want to deviate from my kind of point of why wear a Rolex or why have a Rolex. But there are many kind of branches within this whole story which we can definitely stumble into. I mean, another reason to wear a Rolex, I remember when I got my first one back in about 6 years ago now. I had it a few weeks, and I had a meeting with a lawyer, a partner, in fact, a senior partner, and he was wearing a Batman back then. Back then you could buy Batman's Hulks in authorised dealers. And even though we were both working in capital markets and similar industry, albeit different functions. We kind of clicked because he had a Batman, I had a Hulk. It's like, we knew we both had these watches. And after the whole conversation, we just started talking about watches, a Daytona he had, the other collections he has. He turned out to be a massive collector. And it's a fantastic conversation starter. I find having the right watch with the right person. It's kind of, you could almost call it a bit of a networking tool, a bit of a status tool. You know, people will want to do business with you when they see that you have a serious car or a serious watch. And people will say, no, I can do business with a Casio. Bill Gates wears a Casio. Yes, this is true. I'm not saying everything. I'm just saying, generally speaking. I remember this one time I was presenting to a private equity firm somewhere. I thought I was speaking to a bit of a decision maker, but turns out when I met him, I assumed he wasn't a decision maker, and I was right. The reason being is, I noted this, when I was presenting, when I was speaking with him, he was kind of sat like this, listening, asking questions in order to sort of validate his presence, his attendance. And just when he was asking a question which was not very relevant to the topic, but one that seemed like he just wanted to elevate his position in the whole discussion, I saw his watch. It was a two-tone Rolex Submariner, and it was ticking. And then that's when all his credibility for me went out the window. I had a glance and I definitely saw second hands ticking on a Rolex sub. And that's when I was like, you know what? Even if you make a fortune and you're not a watch person, you choose to get a watch, which is kind of trying to say that you're someone you're not. And I just was not interested in speaking with him. And shortly after that, the few weeks which followed, I took the conversation with that particular firm in a different direction, different people, and there was more success from it. Now, there were two things there. The one thing was that he was talking a bit of hot air during a meeting, but two, he was wearing a ticking Rolex, and it wasn't the ticking Rolex quartz from the 70s and 80s, to tell you that. It was a two-tone Submariner which was ticking. So simple as that. I make a judgment call on that, and that's how it was. I remember another story, Rolex. I met one of my high MDs, high up in MDs in my firm. It's a global firm, and he was wearing a Sea Dweller 16600, and even though we were meeting, it was one of those things where we both knew we were wearing the same watch. Even though he's above me in the entire firm, we're wearing the same watch, and we have something in common. Not only did we have the watch in common, we had training in common, we had tennis in common, we had a lot of things in common. And again, it was kind of like a networking tool, you know. I met another head of a region. Never met him, I just knew he was really high up once. So we were in a bar. One of them, you know, everyone had a few sherbets, everyone was, a little bit merry. And I spoke to him, I said, that's a nice Explorer you got, the nice Polar. Literally, we were talking watches for the next 10-15 minutes about watches, motorbikes. Even though this guy was so high up in the company, we were just talking about watches. And again, another sort of networking chat, conversation. What else did we say? Yeah, we were talking about bikes, watches. There is definitely one reason why I personally don't need a Rolex or any watch really. Or you would assume, because I collect watches, that you would assume one thing, 100%. You would assume that this is the most punctual guy in the world. You would assume this guy is never late. He's always on time. And it makes me laugh because, you know, I'm into my watches. And if it's one thing that you have a watch for, one reason is to have the time, to know where you're meant to be and when. For me, that's not what watches are really for. It's amazing, it keeps time, but me in my own personal way, the way I operate, I'm so optimistic about time, about how long it takes me to get ready, how long it takes me to get somewhere, over optimistic about traffic, over optimistic about taxis or drivers or anyone in terms of getting me from A to B. I'll always leave it where if I need to be somewhere in 15 minutes, I will leave it in such a way that it takes me 14 minutes to get there on a perfect day. And that's one thing that I really need to improve on. But you'd think that someone who's into their watches would always be punctual. And another reason you might want to have a Rolex, well, some people will want to pass it down to their family. Some people will want to pass it down to their son, their kid, their daughter. When they graduate, when they get their first job, their first managerial position, whatever. I remember I used to go to school when I was a kid. I must have been around 10, 11. There were quite a few kids in my class who were wearing Tag Heuers. And I was like, what the hell? I had my Timex back then, or I don't even know what I had, probably a G-Shock. But there were quite a few kids in my class who had Tag Heuers. Their parents would be getting them from the US or whatever. And I think maybe that was one of my first moments when I realised there are other watches apart from the typical Timexes and Seikos Tissets that I had always looked at that age. I didn't really know much about watches. I can't say I had grandparents or fathers who had crazy watches. No one was really into it. But my first watch was a Timex. I think I was about 6 when I got it, 7. It was a horrible black strap with like green lightning on it. Cost about $6.99, about $10. But I loved that watch. It was my first watch, and I think it got me into the whole sort of world of watches. But I just wanted to also just browse my notes, make sure I haven't sort of missed anything. But I kind of wanted to go, why Rolex? You could go for any other brand. I like Rolexes. I think they make a fantastic product. And I guess one other reason that you might want to have a Rolex is you're a watch collector. You want your 5512s, 5513s, your vintages, your new stuff, your new Pepsis, your old Pepsis, your Zenith Daytonas, whatever. You might be a genuine watch collector, and I get watch collecting. I like it. I did it quite strongly for a while, but then I kind of saw it as hoarding, trying to sort of scratch an itch which just keeps itching, and you just keep getting stuff for fixes, owning it, getting rid of it, and whatever. I mean, there's two ways to look at that. One is that you just want to find the perfect watch, and to do that you need to go through a whole bunch of watches to see which one suits you best. For me, it's the 16600. And the other one is that you like to have. Sorry, the other reason is that you just like to have loads of watches. You like to feel that you've collected all the best Pokemon. You've thrown your Pokeball at them and you got them. And that's that's hardcore stuff. That watch collecting. Admittedly, I'm a bit low on vintagey stuff. You'd call it neo vintage, things after the year 2000. But I've seen some right beautiful real vintage pieces out there, and whenever I've seen it out in the wild, I've made time to sort of perv on it long enough without looking like an absolute stalker. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think. I just wanted to share a little bit in terms of why wear a Rolex. I think I've covered some interesting topics and points there. I did want to mention one more thing, and that's with reference to work. Watches in general can be just as good a tool as any in terms of striking up a conversation, a great icebreaker. I had one colleague who, I didn't even know he's a diver, he's a professional diver. We were out once just having a smoke downstairs, and he was like, man, I really like your SKX, that's super cool, like they're difficult to get. I don't think he knew that much about them, but I just said, no, you can get them, but they're a well-known watch. I went into a bit of history about them, and he had a Seiko, some sort of, not a turtle, but something else. Anyway, he was like, yeah, I use mine for diving a lot. Have you ever been diving? And I said, no. And then we got talking about diving, and now I'd like to do some diving, probably over the next few months. I get a diving course, but that was really cool. That happened from me wearing a Pepsi SKX. You do connect with like-minded kind of people, or you do have that common denominator. You know, and at work, for example, you know, so many times people have only noticed my watch because they have a nice watch. You know, they have a nice watch. What definitely won't happen for the people out there who just want to get a Rolex to elevate their status is random people who aren't into watches. They will not notice which watch you're wearing. They don't care unless you just say, "Hi, I'm wearing a Rolex," and they go, "Wow!" All they know is, "Oh, that's expensive." They will just not care. You know, a lot of people will try and buy it to sort of change things. It won't change things. It won't. It will change things in your head, but the external environment stays exactly the same, unless you're going to be in places where everyone's noticing and everyone's judging. There is a bit of judgment to it, of course there is. Hopefully you can back it up with good charisma, you know, good experience, good chat. You can provide an offering to perhaps perhaps the door that this watch has opened for you. I remember I was once playing golf. I was younger, like in my early 20s, and I was wearing a tag of some sort of links. I think tag links. I don't know. And there was this guy who was introduced to me, and I just finished university. But one of the first things he did was he shook my hand, and he looked at my wrist, and I'll never forget that. He shook my hand. He was an older guy. He looked at my wrist immediately. And that was my passport in terms of him seeing what I'm about. If I was wearing perhaps, not that anything happened, I was just introduced to him. It's not like I was doing business just after university, but I would never forget, he shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and then looked at my wrist. And that's just kind of the way it is, and I do that. I meet people now and I do look at their wrist, but not because I'm judgy, it's because I just like watches. But anyway, guys, listen, I thought I'd post a second video. It's December, bit of free time here and there. I hope this video is recorded. I've used a slightly different microphone. I hope it's recorded well. So I'll hopefully get some decent comments. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me know any ideas for future videos. Please don't send me requests for certain particular watches. I'm not going to go and buy a watch and then review it for your sort of purpose. In terms of topics, in terms of light things, in terms of questions on, I don't know, who knows, ceramics, how the market's going. I might have a new watch coming in next week, which I'd like to cover in a video. I might even open it live on the, not live on the, I'll open it on the video, and I'll try not to open the box before, so it'll be my first time to sort of see it, and maybe it'll be your first time to sort of see it whilst I'm seeing it. Anyway, thanks very much guys for listening. Speak soon.